The biting winter wind howled through the pass as Abigail Sinclair clutched her tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, her fingers numb and discolored from the relentless cold. It was December of 1873, and the Sierra Nevada mountains had shown no mercy to the young woman who had foolishly attempted to cross them alone this late in the season. Blood trickled down her temple from where she'd fallen against the rocks. Her horse had been spooked by a mountain lion 3 days ago, leaving her stranded with only the clothes on her back and the small pack she'd managed to grab before the animal bolted. The provisions were gone now, and her strength was fading with each laborious step through the deep snow. Just a little farther, she whispered through chapped lips, her breath crystallizing in the frigid air. The town of Pinecrest, California, was supposed to be nestled somewhere beyond this pass, according to the worn map she'd studied before setting out from Sacramento. Abigail had been so certain she could make it before the worst of winter set in. Now, with night approaching and the temperature plummeting further, she feared she had made a fatal miscalculation. Her vision blurred as she stumbled forward, the cold seeping into her bones. Abigail flexed her fingers, trying to restore some feeling to them, but they remained stiff and unresponsive. The blue-white tinge of her skin told her what she already knew: frostbite had taken hold. The distant sound of hoofbeats penetrated her haze of pain and exhaustion. Hallucinations, she thought bitterly. Hope was a cruel companion when death loomed so near, but the sound grew louder, more insistent, until a dark shape materialized through the swirling snow. A horse. A rider. Salvation. "Help," she tried to call, but her voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. Abigail attempted to wave, but her arms felt leaden. Instead, she collapsed to her knees in the snow, her strength finally deserting her. The last thing she remembered was the silhouette of a man dismounting, strong arms lifting her, and a deep voice saying, "Hold on, miss. I've got you now." When Abigail opened her eyes, she was surrounded by warmth. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across unfamiliar log walls. She lay beneath several thick wool blankets on a narrow but comfortable bed. Confusion clouded her mind as she tried to piece together how she had arrived here. "You're awake." The deep voice startled her. Abigail turned her head to see a man sitting in a chair beside the bed. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His light brown hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges of his collar. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice raspy from disuse. "My cabin," he replied, leaning forward. "About 5 miles outside of Pinecrest. I found you half frozen in the pass." He paused, studying her with concern. "You're lucky to be alive, miss. Another hour out there and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Abigail tried to sit up but winced as pain shot through her hands. Looking down, she saw they were wrapped in clean bandages. "Don't try to move them," the man said, his voice gentler now. "The frostbite is pretty bad. I did what I could, but you'll need to keep them still." "How long have I been here?" Abigail asked, suddenly aware that someone had changed her out of her wet clothes. Heat rose to her cheeks. 2 days, he answered. "You had a fever. I was worried you wouldn't pull through." He must have noticed her embarrassment because he quickly added, "Mrs. Rodriguez from town helped with getting you settled. I fetched her right after bringing you here." Relief flooded through Abigail. "Thank you, Mr. Everett, Ethan Everett." He stood and moved to the fireplace, stirring the embers with a poker before adding another log. "And you are?" "Abigail Sinclair," she replied. "I was traveling to Pinecrest too." She broke off, a wave of dizziness washing over her. Ethan returned to her side, concern etched on his features. "Save your strength, Miss Sinclair. There'll be time for explanations later." He reached for a cup on the bedside table. Can you drink? It's broth." Abigail tried to take the cup, but her bandaged hands couldn't grasp it. Frustration and embarrassment coursed through her. Without a word, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and gently held the cup to her lips. "Small sips," he instructed. The broth was warm and savory, spreading comfort through her chilled body. When she had finished, Ethan set the cup aside. "You should rest now," he said, standing. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." "Wait," Abigail called as he reached the door. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Ethan turned, a slight smile touching his lips. "Out here we look after each other. It's how we survive." With that, he stepped outside, leaving Abigail alone with her thoughts. As sleep began to claim her once more, she couldn't help but wonder about the kind cowboy who had saved her life. In her 22 years, she had rarely encountered such selflessness, especially from a man who asked nothing in return. The next few days passed in a blur of sleep, pain, and gradual healing. Ethan was a constant presence, changing her bandages with surprising gentleness for a man whose hands showed years of hard work. He brought her food, helped her eat, and kept the fire blazing to ward off the persistent mountain chill. On the 5th day, Abigail felt strong enough to sit up properly and share her story with her rescuer. "I was a teacher in Sacramento," she explained as Ethan sat in the chair beside her bed. "My parents died last spring. Influenza took them both within a week of each other." "I'm sorry," Ethan said softly. Abigail nodded in acknowledgement of his sympathy before continuing. "After they passed, I received a letter from an old friend of my mother's, Martha Holden. She lives in Pinecrest and offered me a position at the school there." She looked down at her bandaged hands. "I should have waited until spring to make the journey, but I had nothing left in Sacramento except painful memories." "The mountains can be treacherous even for those who know them well," Ethan remarked. "You're not the first to underestimate them, and you won't be the last." "How did you find me?" she asked. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "I was checking my trap lines." "Winter's the time for it. The pelts are thicker. I heard what I thought was a voice on the wind." He shrugged. "Almost rode past, thinking it was just the storm playing tricks. Then I saw something in the snow. It seems I owe you my life, Mr. Everett." "Ethan," he corrected. "And you don't owe me anything, Miss Sinclair." "Abigail," she replied with a small smile. "After all, it seems strange to stand on formality with the man who's been spoon-feeding me for days." A faint flush colored his cheeks, and he cleared his throat. "How are your hands feeling today?" Abigail flexed her fingers beneath the bandages, wincing slightly. "Better, I think. The pain isn't quite as sharp." "That's good. I need to change the dressings again." Ethan retrieved a wooden box from a shelf and sat beside her on the bed. As he began to unwrap the bandages, his touch was cautious, almost reverent. When the bandages came away, Abigail had to stifle a gasp. Her hands were mottled with patches of white, red, and purple, the telltale signs of severe frostbite. "It looks worse than it is," Ethan assured her, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "The doctor in Pinecrest checked you 2 days ago when you were sleeping. He said we caught it in time to save the tissue." "Will I?" Abigail hesitated, fear gripping her heart. "Will I be able to use them normally again?" "The doctor thinks so, with time and proper care." Ethan began applying a salve that smelled of herbs and beeswax. "You might lose some feeling in the fingertips, but he's seen worse cases recover almost completely." Relief washed over her. As a teacher, her hands were essential to her livelihood. "Thank you," she whispered, watching him work, "for everything." Ethan's eyes met hers briefly before returning to his task. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most would have left me at the nearest town, not brought me into their home and cared for me day and night." He didn't respond, continuing to wrap fresh bandages around her hands with focused attention. When he finished, he didn't immediately move away. Instead, he cupped his own large, calloused hands around her bandaged ones, enveloping them in warmth. "Your circulation needs to improve," he explained, not meeting her gaze. "This helps." Abigail felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her injuries. The simple act of him holding her hands, even through layers of bandages, created a peculiar intimacy between them. "Tell me about yourself," she said, desperate to break the charged silence. "Have you always lived in these mountains?" Ethan released her hands and stood, moving to stoke the fire. "No. I came west after the war, couldn't settle back into Virginia life after what I'd seen." His back was to her, shoulders rigid with memories he didn't share. "Worked cattle drives for a few years, then won this cabin in a poker game from a man eager to head to San Francisco." "You fought in the war?" Abigail asked softly. He nodded without turning. "Confederate cavalry. Not something I'm proud of now, but at 19 you don't question what your father and brothers believe is right." Finally, he faced her. "I lost them all at Gettysburg." "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. Whatever side he had fought on, the loss was real. Ethan's expression softened. "It was a lifetime ago. Now I raise a few horses, hunt, trap in winter, keep to myself mostly." He paused. "Until strange women start collapsing in snowdrifts on my property." The teasing note in his voice made Abigail smile. "Well, I do apologize for the inconvenience, Mr. Everett." "Ethan," he reminded her, a smile tugging at his lips. "Ethan," she repeated, savoring the name. That evening, Ethan helped her to the small table near the fireplace, where they shared a simple but hearty stew. It was the first time Abigail had been out of bed since her rescue, and she relished the change of scenery, limited though it was. The cabin was smaller than she had imagined, just one room with a fireplace, a bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves stocked with supplies. A saddle and other tack hung from pegs on one wall, while rifles and hunting equipment adorned another. "Where have you been sleeping?" she asked suddenly, realizing the cabin contained only one bed. "I have a bedroll," Ethan replied, gesturing to the floor near the fire. "It's comfortable enough." Guilt flooded through her. "I've displaced you from your own bed." "I've slept in far worse conditions," he assured her. "Besides, you need it more than I do." After dinner, as the mountain night wrapped the cabin in darkness, Ethan brought a basin of warm water to the bedside. "The doctor said we should soak your hands each night," he explained. "It helps with the circulation." Abigail nodded, allowing him to unwrap her bandages again. The process was becoming routine but no less intimate. As he lowered her hands into the warm water, she couldn't suppress a small gasp of pain. "Too hot?" he asked immediately. "No, it's fine," she assured him. "Just sensitive." Ethan sat beside her, supporting her wrists as her hands remained submerged. "The doctor says that's a good sign. It means the nerves are still alive." They sat in companionable silence as the minutes ticked by. Outside, the wind howled around the cabin, but inside, the fire crackled merrily, casting golden light across Ethan's features. Abigail found herself studying him, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, the way his mouth naturally curved upward even in repose. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. Heat rose to her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange life is," she admitted. "A week ago, I was certain I was going to die alone in the snow. Now I'm here with you." Ethan's eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. "Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." After soaking her hands, Ethan dried them carefully with a soft cloth, then applied the salve once more. but instead of immediately rebandaging them, he hesitated. "The skin needs to breathe a bit," he explained, "and there's something that helps with circulation." Before Abigail could ask what he meant, he took her right hand between both of his. Gently, so gently she could barely feel it, he began to massage her palm with his thumbs, working in small circles. His hands were warm, the heat seeming to penetrate her cold, damaged skin and reach something deeper. "Does that hurt?" he asked, his voice low. "No," she whispered, transfixed by the sight of her small, pale hand nestled between his larger, sun-darkened ones. "It feels good." Ethan continued the gentle massage, working from her palm to each finger, careful to avoid the most damaged areas. When he finished with her right hand, he moved to her left, repeating the process with the same gentle thoroughness. Abigail watched his face as he worked, struck by the concentration in his expression. This man, who had lived alone in the wilderness for years, possessed a tenderness she hadn't expected. It moved something within her, something that had been cold and numb long before the mountain winter had claimed her hands. When he finally rewrapped her hands in clean bandages, Abigail found herself reluctant for the moment to end. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan nodded, packing away the supplies. "We'll do the same tomorrow night. It'll help." That night, as Abigail lay in bed listening to Ethan's steady breathing from his place by the fire, she realized with a sudden clarity that she was developing feelings for this quiet, kind man who had saved her life. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She was meant to be in Pinecrest, starting a new life as a schoolteacher, not falling for a solitary mountain man who probably had no place in his life for someone like her. Yet as sleep claimed her, she couldn't help but remember the feeling of his hands cradling hers, warming them, healing them, and she wondered if perhaps he was healing more than just her frostbitten skin. The following days fell into a rhythm. Each morning, Ethan would help Abigail with breakfast before heading out to check his trap lines or tend to his horses in the small stable behind the cabin. He never stayed gone long, always returning by midday to check on her. In the afternoons, he taught her to play checkers, moving the pieces for her until her hands were healed enough to manage on her own. They talked about books Ethan had a small but cherished collection, and about the places they had seen and the things they had done. He told her about his years on cattle drives, about the characters he had met and the vast, open country he had crossed. She shared stories of her students in Sacramento, of her childhood in San Francisco before her family had moved inland. As the days passed, Abigail's strength returned. Her hands began to heal, the angry colors fading to a more natural pink, though some areas remained numb to the touch. Each night, Ethan would soak her hands in warm water, massage them gently, then hold them between his own, sharing his warmth with her damaged skin. It was during one such evening, a week and a half after her rescue, that something changed between them. "I think I should try to reach Pinecrest soon," Abigail said as Ethan worked his thumbs across her palm. "Mrs. Holden must be wondering what happened to me." "And the school, it's still too dangerous," Ethan interrupted, his fingers stilling. "The pass hasn't cleared yet." "But I've imposed on your hospitality for too long already," she protested. Ethan's eyes met hers, unexpectedly intense. "You're not imposing, Abigail." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. His hands tightened slightly around hers. "I don't want you to go yet," he admitted, his voice lower than before. "Not until I'm certain you're fully recovered." Abigail's heart beat faster. "And when will that be?" "When you can do this," he said, and slowly, deliberately, he interlaced his fingers with hers. The gesture was simple but profound, intimate in a way that transcended the clinical care he had been providing. Abigail didn't pull away. Instead, she curled her fingers around his as best she could, ignoring the twinge of pain that accompanied the movement. "I might need more practice," she whispered. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, hope perhaps, or desire. He leaned forward slightly, and for a moment, Abigail thought he might kiss her. But instead, he gently disengaged their hands and began wrapping the bandages around her fingers once more. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice gruff. "Storm's coming tomorrow, according to my knee." Abigail nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course. Later that night, she lay awake listening to the wind picking up outside, heralding the approaching storm Ethan had predicted. Her thoughts whirled like the snowflakes that would soon be battering the cabin walls. What was happening between them? Was it merely gratitude on her part, or something deeper? And what of Ethan's feelings? Was his concern purely that of a good Samaritan, or was there something more behind those sky-blue eyes? The storm arrived with the dawn, howling around the cabin with a ferocity that made the previous blizzard seem tame by comparison. Ethan added extra logs to the fire and hung blankets over the single window to keep out the drafts. "We're in for a bad one," he observed, glancing at Abigail. "Might last a couple of days." "I'm glad I'm not out there," she said, shuddering at the thought of facing such weather alone. Ethan smiled. "Me too." The day passed slowly as the storm raged outside. Confined to the cabin, they played checkers, talked, and shared stories from their pasts. Ethan told her about his horse-breaking business. He trained mounts for the local ranchers and occasionally for the cavalry at the fort 50 miles east. "It's a good life," he said as they sat by the fire, a pot of coffee warming on the hearth. "Quiet but good. Don't you get lonely?" Abigail asked. Ethan stared into the flames for a long moment. "I never thought I did," he finally answered. "Until recently." Their eyes met across the small space, and Abigail's breath caught in her throat. There was no mistaking his meaning. The storm continued into the night, the wind rattling the door in its frame. After their evening ritual of soaking and massaging her hands, Ethan once again interlaced his fingers with hers, this time holding on a little longer, feeling warmer. He asked, his voice a low rumble that Abigail could almost feel in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, "though I'm not sure if it's my hands or the rest of me." A smile tugged at his lips. "That's so." Gathering her courage, Abigail leaned forward slightly. "Ethan," she began, uncertain how to express what she was feeling. He saved her the trouble. With exquisite gentleness, he released one of her hands and brought his fingers to her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw. "I keep telling myself this is wrong," he murmured. "That you're only feeling gratitude, that once you're healed you'll be on your way to Pinecrest and forget all about the mountain man who found you in the snow." "That's not true," Abigail protested. "I could never forget you, Ethan. Never." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, sending sparks of sensation through her body. "I've been alone a long time, Abigail. I thought that was how I wanted it. Now I'm not so sure." In answer, Abigail turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss to its center. She felt rather than heard his sharp intake of breath. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Ethan leaned in. His lips met hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a whispered conversation between two souls who had found each other against all odds. When they separated, Ethan's eyes were dark with emotion. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, though he made no move to increase the distance between them. "Why not?" Abigail asked, her voice barely audible over the howling wind outside. "Because now I don't know how I'll let you go when the time comes." Abigail brought her bandaged hand to his face, mirroring his earlier gesture. "Who says I want to be let go?" This time when he kissed her, there was less hesitation, more certainty. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and Abigail melted against him, feeling truly warm for the first time since she'd set out on her ill-fated journey. The storm lasted 3 days, keeping them snowbound in the cabin. Those days were filled with quiet conversations, shared meals, and increasingly lingering touches. Each night, after tending to her hands, Ethan would hold them between his own, warming them with his touch before kissing her goodnight. He still slept on his bedroll by the fire, but Abigail could feel the invisible threads drawing them closer together. On the 4th morning, they awoke to silence. The storm had finally passed. Sunlight streamed through the window as Ethan pulled back the blanket that had covered it during the blizzard. "Beautiful day," he remarked, turning to Abigail. "How are your hands feeling this morning?" She flexed her fingers, noting with pleasure that the movement came easier than before. "Better, much better," Ethan smiled. "Let's have a look." He unwrapped the bandages with the same care he always showed, but this time when her hands were revealed, both of them were surprised by the improvement. The angry red and purple hues had faded considerably, leaving behind pink skin that was tender but healing well. "The doctor was right," Ethan said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "You're healing faster than I expected." Abigail studied her hands, moving each finger experimentally. There was still numbness in some places, and the skin felt tight and strange, but the improvement was undeniable. She looked up at Ethan, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. She was grateful for her recovery, of course, but it also meant that her reason for staying was diminishing by the day. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan's expression grew more serious. "I should be able to get you to Pinecrest soon, once the trail clears a bit more." "Yes," Abigail agreed, though the word felt hollow in her mouth. "I suppose I should send word to Mrs. Holden that I'm alive at the very least." Ethan nodded, dropping his gaze to her hands once more. "I could ride to town today, let people know you're safe. The main street should be cleared by now. Will you come back?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing her fear that once he left the cabin, the spell between them might be broken. His eyes met hers, warm with affection. "Of course I will. Wild horses couldn't keep me away." After breakfast, Ethan prepared for the ride to Pinecrest. He dressed in his warmest clothes and checked his rifle before strapping it to his saddle. "I shouldn't be gone more than a few hours," he told Abigail as he stood in the doorway. "There's plenty of firewood stacked inside, and stew keeping warm on the hearth." "I'll be fine," she assured him, though she already felt his absence like a physical ache, and he hadn't even left yet. Ethan hesitated, then stepped back toward her. Cupping her face in his hands, he kissed her a lingering, promising kiss that left her breathless. "I'll be back before dark," he whispered against her lips. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him. Alone for the first time since her rescue, Abigail wandered the small cabin, examining the details of Ethan's life that she had been too weak to notice before. His books were well-worn history, some poetry, practical guides to survival and horse training. A small carved wooden horse stood on one shelf, made with obvious care and skill. Beneath his bed, she spotted a wooden box, but respect for his privacy kept her from investigating further. The hours passed slowly. Abigail practiced using her hands, pleased with their increasing dexterity. By mid-afternoon, she was able to hold a cup without assistance, and even managed to leaf through one of Ethan's books, though turning the pages was still challenging. As the light began to fade, Abigail grew anxious. Ethan had promised to return before dark, but the sun was already slipping behind the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. Just as she was considering whether to add more wood to the fire, she heard the welcome sound of hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her as she hurried to the door, opening it just as Ethan dismounted from his horse. He wasn't alone. A gray-haired woman bundled in a heavy coat and carrying a leather medical bag stood beside him. Behind them, a wagon was visible, the driver remaining seated with the reins in his gloved hands. "Abigail, this is Mrs. Holden," Ethan said, guiding the older woman toward the cabin. "She insisted on coming back with me when she heard you were alive." "Abigail Sinclair," Mrs. Holden exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace her. "My dear girl, when your stage didn't arrive and then the blizzards came, we feared the worst." Abigail returned the embrace awkwardly with her bandaged hands. "I'm so sorry to have worried you, Mrs. Holden. I made a terrible mistake trying to cross the mountains alone." "Never mind that now," the older woman said, drawing back to examine her. "Mr. Everett here has told me how he found you. God bless him for it. Now, let's have a look at those hands." Inside the cabin, Mrs. Holden proved to be more than just a concerned friend. She was also the town's unofficial nurse, having assisted the doctor for many years. She examined Abigail's hands with professional efficiency, asking questions about the treatment Ethan had been providing. "You've done remarkably well, Mr. Everett," she pronounced after completing her examination. "I couldn't have done better myself. The doctor will be pleased." Ethan, who had been standing by the fire, acknowledged the compliment with a nod. "I just did what needed doing." Mrs. Holden rewrapped Abigail's hands with fresh bandages, then turned to her with a warm smile. "Now, my dear, I've brought you some clean clothes and necessities. And when you're ready, Thomas is waiting with the wagon to take us back to town. The school has been in an uproar without a teacher, but the children will be overjoyed to know you're safe." Abigail glanced at Ethan, whose expression had become carefully neutral. I'm not sure I'm ready to travel just yet, Mrs. Holden." The older woman looked between them, her keen eyes missing nothing. "I see," she said after a moment. "Well, perhaps a few more days of recovery wouldn't hurt. The doctor did say not to rush these things." Relief washed over Abigail. "Thank you for understanding." Mrs. Holden patted her arm. "I'll tell the school board you'll be arriving as soon as your health permits." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And I'll make sure they continue holding your position and accommodation. After all, you've been through quite an ordeal." After giving Abigail the bundle of clothes and supplies, Mrs. Holden prepared to leave. At the door, she pulled Ethan aside for a private word that Abigail couldn't hear. Whatever was said, it left Ethan with a thoughtful expression as he escorted the older woman back to the wagon. When he returned, the cabin seemed smaller somehow, more intimate. Abigail stood by the fire, uncertain. "What did Mrs. Holden say to you?" she asked. Ethan hung his hat on a peg by the door before answering. "She told me to be sure of my intentions toward you." Heat rushed to Abigail's cheeks. "Oh, she's protective of you," he continued, moving closer. "Said you've had your share of hardships and deserve someone who will treat you right." "And what did you tell her?" Abigail's heart hammered in her chest. Ethan's eyes met hers, sincere and steady. "I told her that my intentions are honorable and that I would never do anything to hurt you." "And what are your intentions, Ethan Everett?" she whispered. He took her bandaged hands in his, holding them with exquisite care. "I know it hasn't been long, Abigail. Maybe what I'm feeling is crazy, but I haven't been able to think about anything except you since the moment I found you in the snow." He paused, searching her face. "I don't want you to go to Pinecrest, not if it means I won't see you again." "What are you saying?" Her voice trembled with hope and fear intermingled. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you," Ethan admitted, "and I'm asking you to stay, not as my patient but as whatever you want to be." Abigail felt tears spring to her eyes. "I don't know what to say. I came here to be a teacher, to start a new life." "You can still teach," he said quickly. "Pinecrest is only 5 miles away. You could ride there each day, or—" He hesitated. "Or I could build onto the cabin, make it proper for a schoolhouse right here. There are enough children in the outlying farms who can't make it into town regularly." The offer took her breath away. "You would do that?" "I would do anything to keep you in my life, Abigail." His voice was rough with emotion. "I know it's fast. I know we're still getting to know each other. But something in me recognized something in you that first day, and it's only grown stronger since." Abigail felt as though her heart might burst from her chest. "I feel it too, Ethan. I've never felt this way about anyone before." Slowly, carefully, Ethan drew her into his arms. His kiss was tender, reverent, a promise of things to come. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "At least until you're fully healed. Give us a chance to see what this could become." "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "I'll stay." The following weeks brought rapid changes to both Abigail's health and her relationship with Ethan. Her hands continued to heal, though the doctor warned during his visit that she might always have some sensitivity to cold and occasional numbness in her fingertips. "Small price to pay for keeping all your fingers," he remarked cheerfully after his examination. "Many with frostbite this severe aren't so fortunate." As she regained the use of her hands, Abigail insisted on taking on some of the cabin's chores. She learned to cook on Ethan's cast iron stove, washed their clothes in the metal tub he hauled into the cabin, and even began helping with the care of his horses. Every evening, they continued their ritual. Though the medical necessity had passed, Ethan still warmed her hands between his own, massaging the healing skin and ensuring the circulation remained strong. These quiet moments became the heart of their days together, a time when stories were shared, dreams were whispered, and their bond grew ever stronger. True to his word, Ethan began planning an addition to the cabin that could serve as a small schoolroom. He rode to neighboring farms, speaking with parents about the possibility of their children receiving an education closer to home. The response was enthusiastic. Many families struggled to send their children the full distance to Pinecrest, especially during the harsh winter months. Mrs. Holden visited again, bringing news from town and discussing Abigail's teaching plans with genuine interest. "The school board is disappointed, of course," she told Abigail as they sat at the cabin's small table. "But they understand the value of reaching those outlying children. They're even willing to provide some books and supplies if you can manage the rest." "That's wonderful news," Abigail said, glancing at Ethan with a smile. "We've already started gathering what we can." Mrs. Holden's gaze moved between them, noting the "we" with obvious approval. "I can see you've found something more than just a teaching position out here, my dear." Abigail blushed but didn't deny it. "Yes, I have." After Mrs. Holden departed, Ethan pulled Abigail into his arms, planting a kiss on her forehead. "She likes you," he observed, "and she approves of us." "I'm glad," Abigail replied, resting her head against his chest. "Though I wouldn't care if she didn't. My mind is made up." Ethan chuckled, the sound reverberating through his chest. "Is that so? And what have you decided, Miss Sinclair?" Abigail looked up at him, her heart in her eyes. "I've decided that I love you, Ethan Everett, and that whatever the future holds, I want to face it with you." His expression softened, blue eyes warming with emotion. "I love you too, Abigail, more than I thought possible." As January turned to February, the worst of winter began to ease its grip on the mountains. The trails became more passable, allowing Ethan to make frequent trips into Pinecrest for supplies. On one such journey, he returned with a special package that he kept hidden from Abigail's curious eyes. That evening after their meal, he seemed unusually quiet. Abigail noticed his distraction as she washed the dishes, his gaze repeatedly drifting to his saddlebag hanging by the door. "Is something wrong?" she finally asked. Ethan started, then shook his head. "No, nothing's wrong, just thinking." "About what?" Instead of answering, he retrieved the saddlebag and withdrew a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said, returning to her side. Curious, Abigail dried her hands on a towel and accepted the box. Inside, nestled on a piece of soft cloth, lay a simple gold ring with a small pearl set at its center. "Ethan," she gasped, looking up at him with wide eyes. He took her hands, fully healed now, though bearing the slight discoloration that the doctor said might always remain, and held them gently in his larger ones. "I know we haven't known each other long," he began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "And I'm not a man of many words or grand gestures, but I do know that finding you that day changed everything for me." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Abigail Sinclair, and I want to spend the rest of my life keeping you warm and safe. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Abigail's eyes, blurring her vision. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." With slightly trembling hands, Ethan took the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Mrs. Holden helped me with the size," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "She measured your finger while checking your hand's last visit." "You were that confident in my answer," Abigail teased, admiring how the pearl caught the firelight. "Not confident," Ethan replied, drawing her close. "Hopeful." Their kiss sealed the promise between them, a commitment born in the most unlikely circumstances but no less powerful for it. They were married in early March, when the mountain passes had cleared enough for travel. The ceremony took place in Pinecrest's small church, with Mrs. Holden standing proudly beside Abigail and the town's sheriff serving as Ethan's witness. The entire community turned out to celebrate the union of the schoolteacher who had never arrived and the reclusive horseman who had saved her life. "Not exactly how I planned to start my new position," Abigail whispered to Ethan as they shared their first dance as husband and wife in the town hall. "Disappointed?" he asked, a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. "Not for a moment," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "Some things are simply meant to be, even if they don't happen the way we expect." By April, the addition to the cabin was completed, a bright, airy room with windows on 3 sides and enough space for 12 students. Word had spread through the scattered homesteads, and by the time Abigail held her first class, 15 children of varying ages had enrolled in the mountain school. Ethan continued his horse training business, but now he worked closer to home, converting part of his land into proper paddocks and a larger stable. In the evenings, he would often sit at the back of the schoolroom, quietly watching Abigail teach the remaining adults who came for reading lessons after their day's work was done. "You're a natural teacher," he told her one night as they prepared for bed. "Those people adore you." "I love teaching them," Abigail replied, brushing out her long hair. "It gives me purpose, knowing I'm helping them build better lives." Ethan moved behind her, taking the brush from her hands to continue the task himself. "You've certainly built a better life for me," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Abigail closed her eyes, savoring the tenderness of his touch. "We built it together." As spring turned to summer, and summer to fall, their life together settled into a rhythm that suited them both. The school thrived, with more families sending their children as word spread of Abigail's skill and patience. Ethan's reputation as a horse trainer grew as well, bringing steady work and a comfortable living. Every night, without fail, he would take her hands in his before they slept, warming them between his own in a ritual that had long since transcended its original purpose. It had become their private moment of connection, a silent reaffirmation of the bond that had formed when he found her half frozen in the snow. Winter returned to the mountains, bringing with it memories of the blizzard that had changed their lives. On the anniversary of the day Ethan had found her, Abigail awoke to find him already up, stoking the fire to ward off the December chill. "Good morning," she said, watching him from their bed. Ethan turned, a smile warming his features. "Good morning, Mrs. Everett." He brought her a cup of coffee and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. "1 year ago today," he remarked, "I almost rode past a shape in the snow." Abigail reached for his free hand, interlacing their fingers. "I'm glad you didn't. Best decision I ever made." He set his coffee aside and took both her hands in his, a familiar gesture that still sent warmth spreading through her body. "How are they feeling this morning?" "The cold doesn't bother them too much. They're perfect," she assured him. "Especially when you hold them like this." Ethan's thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms, his eyes holding hers. "I was thinking," he said after a moment, "that the cabin might need another addition soon." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "Oh, are more students enrolling?" "Not exactly." His smile turned tender. "I was thinking more along the lines of a nursery." Her breath caught in her throat. "A nursery, if you want," he added quickly. "I mean, we haven't really discussed children, but I thought—" "Yes," Abigail interrupted, her heart overflowing with love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "Yes, I want that. Very much." Ethan's face lit up with joy. "Really?" "Really," she confirmed, then bit her lip. "Actually, we might need that nursery sooner than you think." For a moment, Ethan looked confused, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Abigail, are you saying?" She nodded, unable to keep the smile from her face. "The doctor confirmed it when I was in town last week. We're going to have a baby, Ethan. In the summer." With a whoop of joy that startled the cat dozing by the fire, Ethan gathered her into his arms, pressing kisses to her face, her hair, and finally her lips. "A baby," he whispered against her mouth. "Our baby. Our baby," she echoed, tears of happiness spilling down her cheeks. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other as the morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the life they had built together from the most unlikely beginning. That evening, as snow began to fall gently outside their window, Ethan took Abigail's hands in his as he had done every night since he found her. But this time, after warming her fingers between his palms, he lowered his hands to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "For what?" Abigail asked, covering his hands with her own. "For surviving," Ethan replied simply. "For being strong enough to hold on until I found you, for giving me a chance to love you, for everything." Abigail leaned into him, drawing strength and warmth from his solid presence beside her. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life." "And you saved mine," he countered. "I just didn't know it needed saving until you arrived with your frostbitten hands and stubborn spirit." Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside their cabin, all was warmth and love and promise. As Abigail drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, not just the treacherous mountain crossing, but all the losses and challenges that had led her to set out alone that fateful day. What had seemed like the worst mistake of her life had led her to the greatest joy she had ever known. Sometimes, she reflected as sleep claimed her, the paths we think are leading us to disaster are actually guiding us home. The following summer, Abigail gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Samuel, after Ethan's father, and he quickly became the center of their world. The school closed for a month as Abigail recovered, but the parents and older children pitched in, bringing meals and helping with chores while Ethan divided his time between his horses and his new family. When Abigail resumed teaching that fall, Samuel came with her, sleeping in a cradle beside her desk, or being passed among the adoring older students who took turns holding him during their lessons. The arrangement worked perfectly, allowing Abigail to continue her beloved teaching while keeping her son close. As Samuel grew, so did their little community. More families moved to the area, drawn by the availability of education for their children. Ethan expanded the schoolroom again and built several small cabins on their land to house students from the most distant homesteads during the worst weather months. By the time Samuel was 3, Abigail was pregnant again, this time with twins, a boy and a girl they named James and Elizabeth. Their family of 5 filled the cabin with laughter, tears, and all the beautiful chaos of life. Through it all, Ethan never stopped his nightly ritual. No matter how busy their days, how tired they might be, he always took Abigail's hands in his before they slept, warming them between his palms. Sometimes, when the winter was particularly harsh and memories of that first blizzard surfaced in her dreams, he would massage her fingers until the phantom cold receded, and she felt secure once more. "They don't even hurt anymore," she told him once, watching his careful attention to her long-heeled hands. "You don't need to keep doing this." Ethan had simply smiled, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I'll never stop," he promised. "Not as long as I have hands to hold yours." It was a promise he kept through all the seasons of their lives together, through the joys of watching their children grow, through the sorrows that inevitably touched them, through the quiet moments that made up the fabric of their shared existence. Every night, without fail, he would take her hands in his, a simple act of love that had begun as necessity and become the heartbeat of their marriage. On the 10th anniversary of the day he found her in the snow, Ethan surprised Abigail with a trip to San Francisco, her first return to the city of her childhood, since her parents had moved away when she was 12. They left the children with Mrs. Holden, who, though now well into her 70s, insisted she was more than capable of managing 3 energetic youngsters for a week. "You two deserve some time alone," she declared, shooing them toward the waiting stagecoach. 10 years of marriage should be properly celebrated. San Francisco dazzled them both with its growth and vibrancy. They stayed in a fine hotel, attended the theater, and walked arm in arm along streets teeming with people from all over the world. Yet for all its excitement, Abigail found herself longing for their quiet mountain home after just a few days. "It's too noisy," she confessed to Ethan as they sat on a bench overlooking the bay. "And there are too many people." Ethan chuckled, pulling her closer against the sea breeze. "The mountain air has claimed you completely, my love." "It has," she agreed with a smile. "Or perhaps it's just that home is wherever you and the children are." On their last night in the city, Ethan presented her with a gift, a delicate gold bracelet with 3 small charms, a horse, a book, and a snowflake. "For our beginning," he explained as he fastened it around her wrist. "The horse for me, the book for your teaching, and the snowflake for the storm that brought us together." Abigail blinked back tears as she admired the thoughtful gift. "It's beautiful, Ethan. I'll treasure it always. I have one more surprise," he added, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a folded document and handed it to her. Curiously, Abigail unfolded the paper. It was a deed to a large parcel of land adjacent to their property. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at him in confusion. "I've been saving for years," Ethan explained. "And with the success of the horse business, I finally had enough. That land has the old Jenkins place on it, you know, the 2-story house that's been sitting empty since the family moved to Oregon." "I remember," Abigail nodded. "But why?" Ethan took her hands in his, the gesture that had become so much a part of them. "Because our little cabin is bursting at the seams with 3 growing children. Because the school needs more space. Because I want to give you the home you deserve, with room for all the dreams we still have to build." Abigail threw her arms around his neck, overcome with emotion. "Oh, Ethan, it's perfect." They returned home to excited children and the news that 3 more families had inquired about sending their children to Abigail's school. The timing of their land purchase couldn't have been better. Over the next year, they renovated the Jenkins house, transforming it into a proper home for their family, and converting their original cabin into a dedicated schoolhouse with room for 30 students. Abigail hired an assistant teacher, a young woman from Pinecrest, who had been one of her first pupils, to help with the growing number of children. Ethan's horse training business flourished as well. He built a proper stable and corral on their new property and began breeding his own line of sturdy mountain horses, known for their sure footing on treacherous trails and gentle temperaments. The cavalry became his biggest customer, with officers traveling from as far as Fort Laramie to purchase his expertly trained mounts. Life settled into a new rhythm, different from their early days but no less fulfilling. Their children grew strong and capable, each developing their own talents and dreams. Samuel showed his father's gift with horses, while James exhibited a keen mind for numbers and mechanics. Elizabeth, the youngest by mere minutes, revealed a talent for storytelling that kept the family entertained during long winter evenings. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of family life. There were difficult times. The winter Samuel fell through the ice on a nearby pond and nearly drowned. The scarlet fever that swept through the community, claiming 2 of Abigail's students before it ran its course. The economic downturn that threatened Ethan's business for a tense year. Yet through it all, their love remained constant, a shelter against whatever storms life brought their way. And every night, without fail, Ethan would take Abigail's hands in his, warming them between his palms as he had done since the day he found her half frozen in the snow. When their children were grown, Samuel running his own horse ranch, James working for the railroad, and Elizabeth married to the son of the Pinecrest doctor, Ethan and Abigail found themselves alone again, the house quieter but no less a home. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked one winter evening as they sat by the fire, his thumb tracing the familiar contours of her palm. "Taking that journey alone, risking everything on a new life?" Abigail considered the question, watching the firelight play across his face, older now, lined with the years of their life together, but still handsome to her eyes. "How could I regret the journey that led me to you?" she replied. "Besides, I think some things are simply meant to be. If not that snowstorm, perhaps we would have met some other way." "I'm not so sure," Ethan said, his expression thoughtful. "I was pretty determined to keep to myself back then. If I hadn't found you that day, I might have gone my whole life without knowing what it means to truly love someone." "Then I'm glad for the storm," Abigail said softly, "and for my poor judgment in trying to cross the mountains alone, and even for my frostbitten hands." Ethan raised those hands to his lips, kissing each finger in turn. "I've always believed that whatever force guides this world knew exactly what it was doing when it put you in my path that day." "And what force might that be, Mr. Everett?" she teased gently, his eyes, still that same summer sky blue after all these years, met hers with unwavering certainty. "Call it God, or fate, or simple chance. I only know that finding you was the moment everything in my life finally made sense." Abigail leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his in a gesture of intimacy they had shared countless times over their years together. "I love you, Ethan." Then, now, always. And I love you, he replied, his voice a promise kept through decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. My Abigail, with her once frostbitten hands and her forever warm heart. Outside, snow began to fall, a gentle reminder of the storm that had brought them together so many years ago. Inside, wrapped in the warmth of their enduring love, Ethan and Abigail watched the flames dance in the hearth, their hands intertwined as they had been since the night he had first warmed her frozen fingers between his own. Some might call their story unlikely, a chance encounter in a blizzard that led to a lifetime of love. But as they sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, they knew that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful journeys. And every winter, when the snow blanketed the mountains and the wind howled around their home, they would remember how it all began with frostbitten hands and the gentle warmth of love that had never dimmed through all the seasons of their lives.